The Prosecutors podcast is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you compare direct auto rates from a variety of companies so you can find a great one, even if it's not with them. Quote today at progressive.com to find a rate that works with your budget. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations.
In 1973, the New York City Police Department created a hostage negotiation team.
He's not up against the gun. He's up against the man's mind.
When you're defusing a human bomb, it's the same as when you're taking apart a real bomb. If you skip a step, it's going to blow up right in your face.
Talk to Me tells the high-stakes true story of the world's first hostage negotiation team. It changed policing forever. Talk to Me.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, we have a very special guest, Dr. Kristen Mittelman of Othram, Inc. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my inquisitive co-host, Alice.
Hi, Brett. I am inquisitive because today's guest that we have, we're so lucky to have an hour of her time. I could not stop asking questions. We basically had to cut each other off because you guys are about to hear just one of the most fascinating, cutting edge developers in forensic DNA analysis, something you guys ask us about all the time. And I could not.
And we don't know anything about.
We don't know anything about. I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about the medicine, about the science, about the forensic science of it. All I know is that it can help solve cases. And that's exactly what our guest does today. She is a real superhero who doesn't wear a cape, instead works in a lab to help solve sometimes 100-year-old cases.
No, it's really amazing. You guys are going to enjoy this. So we're going to play our interview with Dr. Kristen Mittelman, and then we'll be back after it's over to tell you how you can support the work she's doing. So I hope you guys enjoy the interview. Alice, I am really excited. I know you're excited. We have today with us Dr. Kristen Mittelman, who is the Chief Development Officer at Othram, Inc., and just one of the most accomplished people. People always talk about how do we have enough time to do what we do. I have no idea how Dr. Mittelman has enough time to do what she does. She is a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology from Baylor College of Medicine, and we are just deeply honored to have her on the show talking to us about DNA.
And you guys, I met Dr. Mittelman, let's see, 2 crime cons ago in Austin. We talked and I was blown away because you guys, we'll stop talking a second because you will see very, very soon that you're just going to want to hear her talk nonstop. The passion she has for this type of technology, for solving crimes, cold cases, and for doing good, and not because it's good for the bottom line, but because it's good for victims' families, and also for the future development of this technology is going to blow you away. So guys, hang on to your hats, hang on to your seats, because you are in for a treat with that huge intro. Dr. Mittelman, thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you for having me, and I hope I can live up to that intro.
Well, Dr. Mittelman, do you want to give a little introduction to yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm the Chief Development Officer here at Othram, like you said, and my job is to make sure that all these cases can be funded and all these cases can be solved. I'm the interface to federal government trying to advocate for this technology, explain the power of this technology and how it's affecting people across the globe now. And I advocate alongside everyone else that is an advocate for forensic genetic genealogy all the time on these different types of cases, and using advanced DNA testing every time that a CODIS profile or CODIS hit isn't there and you sort of hit a DNA dead end in an investigation. I help work with different philanthropists and different philanthropy groups to show what's possible. When Othram started back in 2018, it was the end of 2018. We didn't run our first case until 2019. There were a few cases being solved here and there. I know a lot of you heard about the Golden State Killer case that happened. And then there were a few other ones that you heard here and there, but you didn't see every case that had DNA and a failed CODIS profile come back and be solved. And that is the reason we started Othram. We don't believe it's justice unless it can be applicable to every single case. And so we decided, okay, we're going to build one of these advanced forensic labs, the most advanced forensic lab, and build it using the most advanced genomic technology out there. But within the forensic process, a lot of what you saw before were people using this advanced genomic testing, a lot of which many of us here, including myself, but David, who is our CEO, he actually was part of the first Human Genome Project, the 1,000 Human Genome Project. He helped NIST build the standards that the FDA uses today to make those life and death decisions using this type of sequencing. A lot of us were part of that process in different places. I mean, I have to say more than 10 of us here were part of creating this technology for use in medicine, for use with consumer testing, like you see at 23andMe or Ancestry. I don't know if you guys have taken those tests. And what you saw early on when this technology came into play is people were using those consumer assays or those medical assays to run forensic evidence. And sometimes you would get a result, but most of the time you wouldn't, because forensic evidence is exactly the opposite of what fresh DNA evidence that goes when you go to the doctor and they take your blood, or when you do one of these consumer tests and you're spitting in a tube for a while and they tell you not to eat for 30 minutes to an hour before. You're looking for fresh DNA. You're looking for DNA that is single source. You're looking for DNA that's not contaminated with anything else. Forensic DNA is exactly the opposite. I mean, we're working with bones that were found, in sewage tanks for decades, and bones at the bottom of a lake or left outside for 40 years. And we're working with trace amounts of DNA from a sex assault. There's one, the Stephanie Isaacson sex assault right out of Las Vegas. She was a 14-year-old girl. She was walking to school early in the morning. She was abducted, brutally raped, and murdered. And the only DNA that was left was 0.12 nanograms of DNA. That's about 15 human cells. If I touch my hand, I've left hundreds of cells. So 15 human cells from a 32-year-old assault. It was a mixture of perpetrator and victim, and we were able to identify that perpetrator. And then when CODIS testing confirmed our identity, it actually led to another hit 3 years before for another rape homicide that this person had committed. It's unbelievable. But to be able to work with those types of DNA inputs, to be able to work with DNA that has been burned, DNA that has been chemically treated, that's a very different process. And so what Othram did is we set out to create all the different processes necessary to be able to work with every piece of DNA evidence that can possibly be sent to us. And we're still working on that. Here we are in 2022, and we have now a QC process. We've touched more evidence than anyone else on earth with this type of testing, and we've done it all in-house from beginning to end. So every time we run one of these tests and we get a profile, we call that a truth set, because now the next time we see DNA that has similar properties, we know exactly how to get to that very end, and we know how to get there faster. And so we have created a process. It's kind of like maybe a car inspection for DNA. You take the DNA, that you found at the crime scene and you measure all the different properties. How contaminated is it? Does it have non-human DNA? What is the mixture between one and the other? All of these different properties, many more than what I just named. And then we look at previous examples where we were able to build a profile and identify the perpetrator or victim. And we can tell you up front whether or not we're going to be successful. And if we don't think we are, if we're not 100% certain that we've done this before, at this point we pause and we tell the investigators that we're not willing to consume the evidence or their budget because we are going to do more R&D on those types of samples with non-forensic evidence and then go back and work that case again. We've done this time and time again. There's cases we put on hold on 2019, 2020 that we've gone back to and solved now. But I think people don't understand. You'll hear out there, how is Othram solving so many cases? How is Othram so successful? That's because we're not running every case. We're running the cases we have done enough R&D research with that we are confident, 100% confident that we are able to build one of these profiles. David will kill me for saying 100% because nothing is 100% and I am a scientist, but our QC process, it errs to the side of caution so much that thus far we have been 100% in being able to predict whether or not we can build one of these profiles. And
let me ask you about that. So I think a lot of people don't understand the idea of like DNA being used up or testing DNA and then not being able to test it again. Can you sort of explain what that means?
Yeah, DNA is consumable. And when you go to the doctor and you give blood and they don't get a result, well, at least you can go back and give more blood and try that test again. When you have evidence from a forensic crime scene and you test that evidence and you don't get a result, that's someone's last hope of being identified. That's someone's last hope of getting justice for what happened to one of their loved ones. And it's consumed. It's gone forever. And that's why it's so important. I should have led with that. That's why it's so important to have a QC process, to have a way to know that you're actually going to bring value to the investigation before you even consume that evidence.
So for those people like myself who have no medical background, we say this all the time in our show, but I don't think I actually understand the science. How is the DNA consumed when it's tested? Is there some like analogy you can give, lay people who don't understand the science? What is done to the DNA that literally consumes it so that there's not more to test in the future?
Yeah, so sequencing DNA, you're looking at letter by letter by letter by letter in order to be able to figure out what that sequence is in comparison to, anyone else's DNA or when you upload it to the database to find those matches. And when you're looking at these letters, the letters are pulled apart and then they're gone. They're gone forever. You can't put that sequence back together. So unfortunately, there's no retesting. Once you've labeled the DNA and you put it through a sequencer, it's destroyed. And I feel that many people feel like, well, I helped solve 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 cases using these medical assays. So therefore that's super beneficial to society because these cases now have answers. But unfortunately, 200 or 1,000 cases were run by those assays and most of them didn't have an answer. And that's unacceptable. When you go to the doctor and the doctor treats you with something, that's because there's an expectation that that treatment is going to make you better or it could potentially help you. And there should be an expectation when you're running these forensic tests that you're actually going to bring value to the investigation. And unfortunately, that's not the case most of the time. Prior to us being in this field, people were perfectly fine saying, well, the DNA failed. There was no result. And it was causing law enforcement not to trust the process, to feel like, why would I spend my money on that if most of the time I'm not going to get a result? And honestly, we would feel the same. If you went to the doctor and asked for a cholesterol test and it took 100 times to go get a cholesterol test to get an answer, you probably wouldn't go 100 times. You would say, well, that doesn't seem worth it to me. And so this is what's happening. But again, without being able to ever go back and solve that case. And every case has someone out there that needs to know that answer. Someone out there that has been for decades waiting to find out what happened. And it should be unacceptable to consume that evidence unless you've truly built a process that is robust, reliable, and scalable. And that's what we set out to do. And I think that's what we're showing we can do now. When we first started back in 2019, we solved a few cases the first year, maybe less than 5. I can't even remember what we announced. And then the second year we announced I don't know, a handful again, maybe less than 10. And then the third year we started announcing more and more and more. And you can see now 2022, we're announcing cases every single week, sometimes multiple cases a day. We announced 3 cases yesterday. And I know we're returning leads for, 5, 6, 7 cases every single day back to the investigators. So a year from now, or a year and a half from now, however long it takes to prosecute all these cases and confirm results, you guys are going to start hearing of cases solving, multiple cases announcing every day. And I think that it truly shows that this technology has the power to clear these backlogs. It's not something that can only be used here and there. It is something that is robust and can be used for all these cases. I think yesterday's examples are perfect because this was one agency out of Arkansas. They gave us 3 cases. It was the first 3 cases they ever gave Othram. They decided they'll give us 3, hoping that some of them, at least 1 or 2, would work out. We were able to take the DNA, go through QC, build these profiles, and then we started solving the cases so quickly that they didn't even have time to do individual announcements, and they ended up binning them together and doing one big press conference. And that's to show these are 3 completely different crimes, completely different circumstances, completely different pieces of evidence. They look different in QC as far as how the DNA looks, yet we were able to very quickly, robustly through our system, come to answers and help their families figure out what happened to their loved ones. And now there's investigations as to who committed these crimes. For one of them, they already know. They had a perpetrator that had admitted to killing a Donna earlier on while he was in prison. And then the family immediately said that that was her boyfriend at the time. And they put 2 and 2 together. And so now that investigation is going that direction. For the other case, there were 2 women that drove away with the young man that we identified, and people had seen them together at the end. And now there's an investigation as to what had happened. When you don't know someone's identity, there's very little hope that you're going to figure out what happened to them unless someone comes forward and says, I saw this crime. And once you figure out who someone is, you can piece back together the last few weeks of their lives, and you can start to figure out what happened, who they saw, where they were going. And now there's an investigation as to what happened. Most of our unidentified remain cases end up being an active investigation, and a lot of them solve as to who actually committed that crime against them.
The Prosecutors is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy.
All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare. So it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. The Prosecutors Podcast is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you compare direct auto rates from a variety of companies so you can find a great one, even if it's not with them. Quote today at progressive.com to find a rate that works with your budget. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations.
Alice, I'm trying to lose some weight. I'm doing the keto thing, and that means I'm buying a lot of meat. And I went down to the local butcher's just down the street, and the prices were insane. And that's why I am so thankful for ButcherBox. ButcherBox has tons of options and deals to compare, and you can find a deal that works for you. ButcherBox takes the guesswork out of finding high-quality meat and seafood you can trust. And you can get just what you want delivered right to your doorstep with free shipping for the continental U.S. and no surprise fees. Choose from a variety of box plan options, from curated to customized, and change your plan whenever you want.
Brett, this time of year, we just have a lot of visitors at our house, out of town guests, friends coming over for get togethers during the holiday season. And I've been able to pull out my ButcherBox meat on a moment's notice to make a delicious meal for our guests. And everyone just raves about the taste. It's so good. And really the best part for me as a busy working mom is getting these amazing cuts of meat delivered right to my door. And you can enjoy a range of high quality cuts that are hard to come by at the grocery store at an amazing value. And you also get recipe inspirations, guides, tips, and hacks so you can cook up mouth-watering meals. This Black Friday, ButcherBox is offering our listeners one of their best steak deals. Get 2 10-ounce ribeyes free in every box for a whole year when you join, plus an additional $10 off. Sign up today at butcherbox.com/prosecute and use code PROSECUTE. That's free ribeyes for a year, plus $10 off at butcherbox.com/prosecute with code PROSECUTE. As the weather's turning cooler, Brett, I am so excited to don my new Faraday fall clothing, because Faraday is all about clothing for life's best moments. Whether it's at a Friday night football game, the first day of school, or hanging with the family in your backyard this fall, they make clothes that feel good and make you feel good too. And the best part, I love that Faraday's a family brand that believes comfort and quality are key. For example, I love their one and done jumpsuit. Not only is it comfortable, but I feel so chic in it and can throw it on for a number of occasions.
And that's the thing about Faraday, Alice. Every piece is designed to be a lifetime favorite. I love the fall. I love the cool, crisp weather. And I love my soft and stretchy Legend sweater that has thousands of 5-star reviews, and I can understand why. And if anything ever happens to your clothes along the way as you're enjoying your life, Faraday will replace or fix your clothes for life, no matter what. You can find a new fall favorite at Faraday. Legendary comfort awaits. And right now, Faraday is giving all Prosecutors listeners an amazing deal. 20% off on every order. You heard me. You get a full 20% off of your order. Head to FaradayBrand.com/TP and use code TP at checkout to get this deal. That's code TP at Faraday, FAHERTY, brand.com/TP for 20% off. FaradayBrand.com/TP.
Brett, life seems to just always be going 100 miles per hour for both of us, I know, working full time and also this podcast, and not to mention our very rambunctious little kids. It seems like they always want to eat, and I never have time to run to the grocery store, which is why I'm so excited about our sponsor, HelloFresh. Because with HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. You can skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable, and that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. For me, I love being able to cozy up and save money by cooking at home. My kids love it too because they can join in on the cooking fun, and fall's a perfect time to experience the delicious taste and unparalleled convenience of HelloFresh.
Yeah, Alice, and if you have a packed schedule, HelloFresh's quick and easy meals, like their 20-minute recipes or low prep and easy cleanup options, mean you'll spend less time in the kitchen and more time with your loved ones enjoying HelloFresh. We love HelloFresh. We have never made that a secret, and we hope you guys will join us as well. Go to HelloFresh.com/TP65 and use code TP65 for 65% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/TP65 and use code TP65 for 65% off plus free shipping, and find out for yourself why HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit.
What's your time frame? It sounds like you guys are flying through these tests, because we always hear, you know, in our role as prosecutors, testing is backlogged. It takes forever. I'm talking, we have to hold off charging someone a year, 2 years, 3 years sometimes, because testing is so backlogged. It sounds like you guys are flying through testing. Can you talk a little bit about how you're able to do that, what your time frame is like in terms of testing, and how you're able to deliver that when it seems like every other lab is just, you know, dragging?
Yeah. So again, our experience in the medical field and in medical genomics has really helped us scale this process. You can imagine there's, you know, hundreds of thousands of medical samples being run at a lab at the same time. There's automation and all this process. So when we built Othram, we built it with the idea that we would scale this process the way that it scales in a true genomics lab. But again, by maintaining the forensic process. If you ever come to Othram, and I hope both of you do come and visit, because it's so hard to describe in a podcast, but the lab is truly forensic. It's unidirectional, just like you would see in a forensic lab. If you go towards the end, you have to go home and shower before you come back. We have these vestibules that you go into and get dressed before you enter the rooms. All the rooms are fractionated into smaller rooms. There's bone rooms where the air is going directly to the outside. And then there's all the negative pressure, all of the things you would want in a forensic lab. But at the same time, using the equipment and the power of advanced genomics to truly unlock answers in that DNA. So instead of using equipment from 30 years ago and using the forensic process, we've taken the latest, you know, best possible sequencer out there. We've created all of these upstream processes and all the computational power that comes with our team of experts that have worked on DNA technology from the very beginning, from conception of the first human genome project, put it all together in context of forensics, and truly feel like we are starting to create sort of those roads to justice. And Othram is not going to solve every case on earth, obviously, by ourselves. That's not possible. I know you guys might have seen our announcement working with Canada and the UK, and yesterday our announcement with Australia. And it's amazing to be able to participate and bringing justice across the globe. But there's 250,000 cold cases in the US alone. 40,000 unidentified remains. One lab is not going to do that, and that's not our plan. Our plan is to build a technology, test it so much, have so many truth sets where we know exactly how to make it robust, and then transfer that technology to all of the state labs, other labs that want to work on this, and hopefully soon be, you know, not one lab, but 1,000 labs doing the right thing when it comes to DNA testing and forensics, and getting these answers from the most intractable evidence. And I think that's when there's going to be real impact across the world, because people are going to realize that if they leave 15 cells, if they burn their victims, if they, you know, chemically treat their victims, if they cut their victims into a million pieces and put them at the bottom of a lake, we're still going to be able to identify them. And we're still going to be able to figure out who did this. And I think it's going to truly become a deterrent for crime.
I think you just made a bunch of serial killers like shaking their boots just now.
Earlier, you mentioned CODIS. Just for people that don't know, what is CODIS? Why does it fail? And why are you able to succeed where CODIS doesn't?
You know, CODIS doesn't fail. CODIS was built to confirm identity. CODIS is the standard SDR testing that has 20 markers that has been used in forensics for 30 years. And when you build one of these 20 marker profiles, you upload it to the CODIS database. That's the database owned by the FBI that has known perpetrator DNA in it. And if that person has committed another crime, that confirms that they're a hit, and you know exactly who that person is, and their identity is confirmed. Unfortunately, when you're trying to identify a victim, just like we spoke of a second ago, their DNA is probably not going to be in CODIS because they're probably not a known perpetrator. And so when you put on that 20 marker profile, you don't get a hit. And so you have a DNA dead end. And what we've done is we've built technology where you can infer identity. So after that CODIS test doesn't have a match for a perpetrator or a victim, Othram technology can be used. And what we do is a little bit different. We are looking at building a profile that has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers. And we're taking these profiles that have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers, and we're uploading them to genealogical databases consented for law enforcement use. And then because we have so many markers, we're able to catch really distant relationships, distant familial relationships. So not a one-to-one match, not a parent-child relationship, but a relationship that is maybe a fifth cousin or a fourth cousin or a third cousin. And so you're looking at all these different matches because we're all related in some way, right? In any given region, at any given time, there are only so many people that were the ancestors of that region. And so you see all of these supporting matches pop up, and they're not your relatives that come to Thanksgiving usually. And then you're able to figure out how far your unidentified person is from this piece and this piece and this piece. And you can finally piece them exactly where they belong in a family tree. Then we take those results, we go back to the law enforcement agency, and we say, look, we believe that they belong here in this generation of this family tree. So there are 2 or 3 brothers or whatever the situation may be that are likely candidates to be your unidentified remains, whether perpetrator or victim. And then they go back into their investigation. And if it's an unidentified person, a victim, they call the family and they say, is there someone missing? Usually that phone call ends really well and they say, yes, there is. And then they say, will you donate your DNA so that we can do a comparison? They go down to the station, donate their DNA. We do a one-to-one comparison and the relationship is confirmed. As far as a perpetrator, it's very different. And you guys know this more than me, but they take our investigative lead and they continue to investigate with that context. And they then make sure that it makes sense that these people, were they in the area at the time of the crime? Does that make sense? Maybe did they own the weapon that was used during the crime? Maybe is there, all of these other things they could have thought. Is there a witness that might have put them at the crime scene? There's a million things they look at. And then they make a decision on whether or not to collect DNA, or do they have enough information to get a warrant to collect DNA from that person? And when they do, then there's the one-to-one match. And CODIS testing is always used to confirm Othram's result. That's something that's very important to note. Like I said, all of these cases have already been CODIS tested. So the CODIS test is there. And so that identity can be confirmed with a CODIS test and not just our test. And CODIS testing has gone to court many, many times. And so the CODIS test anchors our investigation. And usually that's suffice in court. Obviously, that's not always the case. You guys know we ended up going to court for the Carla Walker trial here in Texas because Texas is a show me all state. And so they wanted everybody to show the process. We were able to go be part of the Daubert hearing, testify in front of the jury, and our part of the investigation was found admissible. And when that happened, Glenn McCurley actually changed his plea from not guilty to guilty, admitted to the crime. He even had the murder weapon still in his ceiling and belongings from Carla and a whole bunch of other stuff. And at that point, the rest is history.
You mentioned earlier the DNA services that agree to allow you to use this. Do most of them agree to allow you to use their databases, or is it sort of something you have to fight about?
Oh, the consented databases. When I said that there are 3 databases right now that are consented for law enforcement use. Ours is only for law enforcement use. There's nothing that you can come to Othram for other than to identify a perpetrator or a victim. So there's no reason you would ever enter your DNA into DNA Solves except for to help a law enforcement investigation. And then there are 2 other databases, GenMatch and Family Tree DNA, that have had their customers consent into law enforcement use.
So the big ones, Ancestry and 23andMe, did they not consent?
Nope.
I assume that would be really valuable if they did consent at some point.
Now, the more profiles, the easier the genealogy part of this becomes. But the truth is, you can see we are able to identify most people through genealogy with what's in the databases today. And so because there's so many markers, you don't need close relationships like I told you. So you only need a very small part of the population in order to be able to find some of those matches and be able to work back the genealogy. I mean, I would love to live in a world where we upload the profile and we hit to a brother or, a first cousin every single time. time. And so, the more profiles that are in there, the easier it makes that part of the job. But the databases are not the limit to this technology right now. I think where most people are failing is actually being able to read that intractable DNA evidence.
So since you started in 2018 until now, just to give us a view into how quickly you guys have innovated, can you tell us about a technology that you've developed since you started in 2018 and some of the kind of looking at the horizon, what you have yet to come? Because you guys are already on the cutting edge, but I know that you guys are constantly innovating as well.
Sure. One of the things that we saw a lot in the very beginning were there was no evidence left except for evidence that was formaldehyde fixed and paraffin embedded in these FFPE blocks, as you hear during an autopsy. Treating DNA with formaldehyde actually cross-links the DNA. And so you can imagine when you break those cross-link bonds, it would be very hard to read those regions. And so that's something we would say failed QC initially because we had not done enough of that work to know whether or not we could build one of these profiles. So we did a lot of R&D and we started to see that we could do this with non-forensic evidence. And then when we realized that we could, we started to test it with cases. And the Walker County Jane Doe, or Sherry Ann Jarvis, was the first case that we ran from an FFPE block. And we were able to identify her and give her family the closure that they very much needed. And it meant the world to us because that was something that was previously intractable in the field. Now we run FFPE cases all the time. Burnt remains are very similar. We continue to work with mixtures. When you have multiple perpetrators and very difficult mixtures, that's something that you often see that we're continuing to do R&D on. What we do is when we stop a case at QC, we bin it to a category of why we stopped it. What was it that we thought was too much or too difficult to work with? And then we create mock evidence that looks like what the most we have in our backlog is. And we figure out the process. People often say, oh, Othram is a for-profit lab. And, you could have a nonprofit do this and you could have this and you could have that. We are a for-profit lab because we needed to raise funding in order to be able to do all this R&D, in order to be able to create the technology to truly make a difference and not just use existing technology over and over again and hope that we were working with a case that would result in a profile. That's the difference. And the mentality, I know you've met me and you know my passion and drive and you know my why as to why I do this, but it's not just mine. Every single person that works here, I think there's still like 6 or 7 people at work and it's 9 p.m. and we all got here at 8 this morning. And that's how it is every day. And no one has to sit here and work. We have an unlimited paid time off policy and no one takes time off because we don't have to monitor anyone. When you're able to truly make this kind of impact, when you're sitting here every day, dedicating your life and meeting law enforcement agents that have worked on a case for 62 years, and they tell you that they've waited 62 years. It was a 93-year-old law enforcement agent that had found the body of a 9-year-old girl that had been brutally raped and murdered. And he told me, I've waited my whole life to hear the name of the person that did this. And now I can rest in peace. I've met, family members that would go back to the scene of the crime, hoping that the perpetrator would come back and relive the crime and that they could confront them and find them and just sit there for overnight. It's just unreal what you meet and what you hear, and it changes you and it makes you realize that the impact is so much greater than just helping solve one case. And I think if we're successful at what we're doing, we're going to show the world that there's a robust and predictable way to do DNA testing for forensics, just like there's a robust and predictable way to do DNA testing for medicine. And it shouldn't be a different process. It shouldn't be one that's less important or less predictable. This is someone's body part. This is someone's last hope for justice, like I said earlier, and it's unacceptable to use it as an experiment to see whether or not you can actually solve the case. Forensic DNA testing shouldn't be an experimental process. It should be something that is standard, that is something that is done correctly the very, very first time. And I hope that we build this process, and I hope that we disseminate it across the world. And I hope people improve on it. And I hope one day we live in a world where perpetrators are caught the first time they commit a crime, and there are no more cold cases. No one has to wait 60 years to find out what happened to their loved one, or 20, or even 2.
You've talked a lot about the testing and sort of the technology you guys have developed to test, but I'm also interested in the collection of DNA. You talked about collecting DNA in really difficult circumstances. Just sort of walk us through how, particularly when you're looking for a perpetrator. I mean, I guess if you have an unknown victim, there's a body, but if you're looking for a perpetrator, how do you collect the DNA? How do you find the DNA in the first place? I mean, very sort of basic things that people might not understand.
DNA is more robust than people think, and the process is more robust. This little case that I told you about right now, that 9-year-old little girl was Candy Rogers out of Spokane, Washington, and she was raped and murdered in 1959. And so you can imagine back then, the detectives that collected the evidence from the crime scene had no idea what DNA was, whether DNA would ever be used in a criminal investigation, how to collect DNA, had no training on any of this. But they were able to take the evidence from the crime scene and save it and store it in a way that the crime lab for the state was able to extract DNA and then send it to Othram so that we could see whether or not we can build one of these profiles. And we did. And I see this time and time again. We're working cases, and most of our cases way predate the 1990s, when CODIS testing and DNA testing started becoming a standard in forensics. But yet we're still getting these profiles, and we're still able to get these answers. Are there better ways to store DNA? Of course. Are there better ways to collect DNA? Of course. And most law enforcement agents are trained on how to collect DNA from a crime scene, how to store it, what to do with it. When we get DNA, we work current cases as well. When we get DNA from a current case or an old case, we store it exactly the way that it was initially kept by the law enforcement agency. That way, the DNA does not have to go through a shock or a change. Oftentimes, if you just keep it the same, that allows you to be able to maintain more of the structure of the DNA when you're reading through it. But it's not impossible. I mean, we've worked with bones from 1881. It was a homicide victim found outside of a barn from 1881, and we were able to identify her. So you can imagine, I mean, that DNA was exposed to everything for, a really, really long time. And so if you can do that, you can probably work with most pieces of DNA.
So that's really special that you're getting to work with kind of people's last hope, centuries old DNA. How do people bring things to you? Is it coming just from law enforcement? Is it coming from, law enforcement has closed it and family members, have kept something and they want you to do it? How does it come to you? How does someone get you an 1800s, bone?
Exactly. Othram made a choice very early on that we would only work for law enforcement. And so we do not accept evidence from anyone other than a law enforcement agency. We work at the local, state, and federal level. And so if a family member reaches out and says, I would really like you to look at our case, we do have our case managers reach out to that law enforcement agency and say, if there is something we can do to help, we'd love to help. But it would have to be the law enforcement agency that consents to the testing and gives us the piece of evidence. And that's extremely important, because our role here is to be a tool for investigators to use for the rest of time, to be able to sort of solve these cases that were previously intractable or unsolvable. And unfortunately, this type of technology is very new, and people don't know the power of it. And it should be used under the guidelines of the 2019 interim DOJ policy. And when you have people that are not law enforcement agencies that haven't been trained on what those guidelines are, they may send you a piece of evidence that you shouldn't have sequenced. So in order to prevent that from happening, we only work with law enforcement.
And as prosecutors, we appreciate that, actually.
Yeah.
We talk about this all the time, where even the most well-meaning lay people, especially if they're close to the case, can actually hamper an investigation rather than help it, despite, the best intentions. So I think that's a very respectable position that you guys take. And it sounds like you have way more work than your lab could do even.
Can you talk a little bit about the different kinds of DNA? I mean, we hear about touch DNA and semen and blood and bones and everything else. And some, people kind of think touch DNA is not as good or whatever. I mean, how does all that work?
Absolutely. So we can work from touch DNA, we can work from semen DNA, we can work from bodily fluids, anything, and bones, anything that is found at a crime scene. That said, we do not work on any piece of DNA before we meet with the law enforcement agency and make sure that they believe this is a probative piece of DNA. Touch DNA, that's really hard to, I mean, you guys are prosecutors, that's really hard to go to court with, right? You could have touched somebody and not been the perpetrator of that crime. Maybe they just bought this shirt at the, grocery store. And so that wouldn't be a probative piece of evidence, or maybe it would, but that's not a decision for Othram to make. And so every time there's a piece of DNA, especially if it's a criminal case, we actually involve everyone that has a stake in this process. And so we involve the prosecutors, and we let the prosecutors decide if we were able to build a profile. And that's sort of how we start the conversation. If we were able to build a profile from this piece of evidence, is that something that you could take to court? And if the answer is no, then we don't build a profile from that evidence. And, sometimes there's evidence that comes to us in a criminal case that wasn't good enough for SCR testing, but would potentially be good enough for our type of DNA testing. Right now, SCRs have to sort of bookend our investigation in order for it to go to court, because this process is so new. There are really no standards. There's no accreditation for what we do. I know there's people out there screaming accreditation. There is no accreditation for whole genome sequencing and forensics. I am 1,000% sure of that. We are working on that process, but it's going to take some time. And so do you work those cases? That's the prosecutor's call. Can you take that to court? Are you willing to take that to court? And that's totally not our call. It's the same with the investigator on a case. They pick the piece of evidence that they think we should be sequencing, and we sequence that piece of evidence. That's another reason we only work with law enforcement, because they're able to make those decisions. They're able to know what they need in their investigation, and the prosecutors are able to know what they need to be able to do their part.
So sort of on the opposite side of that, I'm always surprised. Alice and I have had stuff tested for DNA all the time that we are 100% sure should have DNA on it, but then it comes back as not having it. Is that...
For example, guns.
Like guns,
really
all the
hard
time.
for us to get DNA off guns. Obviously, you probably know what a gun looks like. That's not smooth. So, can you tell us a little of what, or we know that the perpetrator was in this car, and somehow, is it just that our investigators are really bad at collecting DNA? And the answer could be yes. I don't know. But sometimes I'm just shocked. I'm like, how? How is this possible? The video shows him licking the gun, and there's nothing.
So, obviously I'm not there when they're collecting that DNA, so I can't comment on what happened, but I can tell you that we have worked with pieces of DNA evidence that have gone to other labs. In fact, there's a case that is going to announce really shortly, and I looked at this report yesterday, and this other lab worked with 2 femur bones and 7 teeth, and they extracted from each one of these remains, and they got 0 DNA, 0. Over and over again. And so it just, the case became a failed case. These bones are not good enough, or they don't have any DNA anymore. And that was the report. And, law enforcement uploads these failed reports to our system because we say, give us any lab reports you have on this DNA. And so sometimes they just come up. The exact same evidence came to our lab, and our scientists extracted only from 1 tooth. From that 1 tooth, they were able to get 1.01 nanograms of DNA. Othram needs about 0.1 nanogram to build a profile. So we could have probably run 10 tests out of that 1 tooth. Same piece of evidence, same time frame, in a couple of weeks of it failing the other lab, and it worked. And so Is there a difference in how you extract DNA? Of course. And so it may not even be the collection. It may just be the extraction process. And I think, people don't value that enough. People look at the end of these investigations and it's the genealogy that's, going through these records and working through these family trees. And that's a really difficult job and a really difficult task to figure out those relationships. And so they call it forensic genetic genealogy. And people think it's this genealogy that's solving all of these cases. But the truth is the genealogy is impossible if you don't have a good profile. It's absolutely, if you have no profile because you can't get DNA because you don't have all of these processes up front in the lab, then obviously that's not going to work. And if you have a profile that has, multiple people in it or contamination or something else, other kind of DNA, then you end up having a whole bunch of matches and you're working this genealogy forever and you're not getting an answer, right? And so this is a two-part process, and the name is not making that clear to the lay audience or maybe even to investigators. This is a two-part process, and you have to be able to get DNA, and you have to make that DNA look, even though it's so messed up, you have to make it look like a profile that came out of someone's mouth today, so you can upload it and compare it to all these other profiles that did come out of someone's mouth that are in this and in these databases and make real comparisons. And that's hard to do. And that takes a lot of science, and that takes a lot of understanding of what DNA does and how it works and the properties that it has. And not everyone can do this. And that's the part of the process that has been missing. And that's the part of the process that, we didn't invent genealogy. We absolutely started fixing the front end part of the process. Previously, a lot of people would get these difficult to read profiles. They wouldn't upload because they didn't have enough markers. They couldn't do something. And people would use computational science to infer. And then they would upload. And I've seen reports where they came to the wrong answer. No, it's not this person. But then when we built the profile and we uploaded it to the database and did the one-to-one comparison, it was that person.
Because you're not looking at like math problem to fill in the blanks. You're literally making apples to oranges into apples to apples, right?
Yes, I'm looking
oh my gosh, that's brilliant.
Letters of DNA. And you know what? In the case I just spoke of is the Little Miss Nobody case, Sharon Gallegos. They had deemed it was not her. And then it was a match. And so you're a prosecutor, you're going to love this. Our report isn't a whole bunch of language about all the genealogy. Our report, when we confirm these results, is a visual representation of every single one of the chromosomes to whatever you're comparing to that known. And it shows you the matches, and it shows you the matches perfectly. And you can see that we've taken bones that no one could work with. No one could even get DNA from. And then it's matching perfectly in all these regions, every single letter. So that just shows you that we were able to put that DNA sequence back together to make it look like the known in that database. And that's certainty. That's knowing that you built a profile that gives you an answer.
Alice, this holiday season, I want to give a gift to my loved ones that makes them feel special and unique, just like the relationship we share. And that's why I'm giving everyone I care about Storyworth. Storyworth is an online service that helps you and your loved ones preserve precious memories and stories for years to come. It is a thoughtful and meaningful gift that connects you to those who matter most. Every week, Storyworth emails your relative or friend a thought-provoking question of your choice from their vast pool of possible options. Each unique prompt asks questions you've never thought to ask, like, what's the bravest thing you've ever done in your life? Or, if you could see into the future, what would you want to find out? The first time I used Storyworth, I used it for my mom, and I gave the gift to her and let her answer the questions. This time, I'm actually having them send the questions to me. And my plan is when the book is finished, it'll be something that I can give to my kids, and they can learn more about their dad than they probably ever wanted to know.
And Brett, I just love this gift because it is always a showstopper. People love being able to kind of document these great family stories, and it's just such a thoughtful gift. You get to read these weekly stories that help you connect with your loved ones, whether you're answering the questions or having a conversation with someone helping them answer the question. With Storyworth, I am giving those I love most a thoughtful, personal gift from the heart and preserving their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/TP and save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/TP. raycon.com/TP to save $10 on your first purchase. Brett, as the holidays creep upon us, I always get so nervous about getting the perfect gift, especially for those hard to shop people like my brothers and my brothers-in-law. And what's even worse, I hate having to fight the crowds with my screaming kids, trying to find parking. Blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. But right now, you can shop early, skip the stress, and snag some of the best deals of the season on something everyone will love. Premium audio products from Raycon. When you're looking for a gift everyone needs or a stocking stuffer that's not a candle for once, Raycons are the way to go. Their wireless earbuds, headphones, and speakers offer premium sound, useful features, and almost custom comfortable fit, and up to 54 hours of battery life. And as the person gifting them, you've got to love that they start at half the price of other premium audio brands. Plus, Raycon makes it easy with holiday gift guides for everyone in your life, like your parents, your coworkers, Brett, your podcast co-host. They really give you lists that knock out all of these at once, and you get 30% off by shopping Raycon's holiday bundles.
Alice, everyone needs a pair of Raycons in their ears, whether it's for listening to music, taking work calls, or blasting a workout playlist. You really can use them all day, no matter what it is you are doing. Raycons are sleek and stylish, and they come in a range of colors to match everyone's style. You can find Raycon in stores now like Kohl's or Walmart, but let me tell you, you're always going to get the best deal when you use our special link, buyraycon.com/prosecutors. And the Raycon website also offers buy now, pay later options. So right now, go to buyraycon.com/prosecutors and use code EARLYBF to get 20% off site-wide. That's 20% off of any Raycon product, which almost never happens. Or save even bigger and get 30% off Raycon's exclusive holiday bundles. That's code EARLYBF at buyraycon.com/prosecutors for 20% off your Raycon purchase. buyraycon.com/prosecutors.
We've got a very different kind of sponsor for this episode, The Jordan Harbinger Show, which is a podcast you really should be listening to. And I know that every day somebody tells you that you just have to listen to some podcast, and you nod and say sure, and then you never listen to it. Guys, don't let this happen here. Jordan's show, which Apple named one of its best of 2018, is aimed at making you a better informed, more critical thinker so you can get a sense of how the world actually works and come to your own conclusions about what's happening, even inside your own brain. Each episode is a conversation with a different fascinating guest, and when I say there's something for everyone here, I really mean it. I think you guys will love the True Crime Starter Pack. I've talked about this before, but have y'all listened? You can learn about the secret life of an American art forger and also Freeway Rick Ross, Life in the Crack Lane, just to name a few of the fascinating episodes.
And Alice, look guys, if y'all aren't listening to this show, we've been talking about it for a while. You need to give it a chance. I promise you, you will enjoy it. We really enjoy this show, and we think you will as well. So I want you to search for The Jordan Harbinger Show. That's HARB as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
You know exactly how to talk to me and what gets me excited. And the reason I think this will resonate with our listeners, the reason that's so exciting, and you are right, that excites me as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, is because we say this all the time. You can't prosecute a case based on bad actions in the past or statistics. Most children are killed by their parents. That could be the case. That could be the statistic, but we don't know that for this case. And what you're saying is you're not filling in the blanks with like statistically, this could be what is inferred. You're saying I'm looking at the actual chromosomes, the DNA we have here, and showing you match for match. And that's like incredible evidence to have.
And it's even better than that. We've been the positions. And so we call it skyline. It looks like a little skyline of chromosomes. You can see every chromosome on this one page. It gives you every explanation on the bottom. You can see whether it's a homozygous match, heterozygous match, or no match across the entire chromosome region. And because it's been together like that, you can't ever infer someone's identity. So you're protecting the person's privacy 100%. So you can really just put it in the court report like this and never worry about it at all.
You have to
And
redact it.
honestly, that's what's necessary. Yes, we built a lot of DNA technology, a lot of computational technology. There's so much more that's necessary. How do you give something to a prosecutor that they can take to court? And it's just very clear, very easy to understand, protects people's privacy. It's easy to show, anyone can understand it. That's necessary. It's been totally missing. How do you create one of these reports for an unidentified remains that can't get a STR test because those bones have been, so degraded, so messed up, but that the medical examiner can look and say, this is without a doubt this person, I can issue a death certificate. We've gotten there. We're learning the process with you guys, right? I mean, we understood medicine and DNA. We had no idea what forensics needed. We had no idea what you guys wanted to take to court. Now we have a really great idea. And the same way with what investigators need to see. And we are going to build all those tools from beginning to end. And that's the reason we kept it all in-house so far, until there's a process that is just foolproof. Someone can get their Othram box in their lab, measure the type of DNA, figure out, can that DNA, what are the properties, kit that science, okay, I need to use kit A to do this, kit B to do this, whatever it is, and then get that answer, have that foolproof report sent to their prosecutor, and they're done. Then yeah, everyone will be able to solve these cases. It won't be just Othram, and the world's going to be better for it. It's going to be a safer and more just place.
I told you guys she was going to change the world.
I know. I love how excited you are about this. I love how excited Alice gets.
This is so cool. I told you, this was the coolest thing.
This is cool. Well, look, I don't want to keep you all night, and you've already given us a ton of your time. I do have another question, though, sort of, what is the biggest misconception people have about DNA? People think DNA is magic. We get that a lot. We hear, people say all the time, test the evidence. And hopefully after listening to you describe why sometimes you don't need to test the evidence, they understand that better. But what do you think is the biggest misconception?
I think the biggest misconception now is I'm going to buy this sequence machine that Othram has, and I'm going to do the exact same thing tomorrow. Well, that's like buying me the best oven out there, the top of the line best oven, and I'm going to tell you that I'm going to be the next best chef. I promise you I'm going to burn the cookies probably twice as fast because that oven is powerful. It's ridiculous. And it's happening all across our globe, and people are hoping they're going to get the same result. And it's just unreasonable because it is not about pressing a button. DNA is not something you can just put into something and it works and it gives you a sequence. I wish it was. But DNA differs from sample to sample, and you need to be able to create those truth sets. You need to be able to look at those properties, actually assess what's happening. In fact, many people that have this machine don't even know if they have human DNA at the time they throw it on there. They're not even measuring that. They're just measuring DNA. And so it's totally unreasonable to think that that's the way it's going to work. DNA isn't something that, medical testing is because the DNA is single source, and we're asking for a very, very specific thing when the doctor takes your blood or when you're spitting in this tube. They make medical testing very robust, right? And so you're looking for a high throughput process, something that can be done quickly. Forensic DNA testing cannot be done in that kind of manner. Every single sample is different. People really need to understand that, and they need to know that every single sample has to be treated as a one and not a whole. It doesn't matter if it's a sex assault and this is another 10 sex assaults. They're not the same. It's like when you said, people say most children are murdered by their parents. Sure, so maybe most sex assaults have a single perpetrator, but that doesn't mean all sex assaults have a single perpetrator, and you may have more mixtures in there, right? You need to measure all of that. You need to measure whether it's a 50-50 mixture or a 10-90 mixture. Every piece of information changes what you do with that piece of evidence. People need to know that, because just consuming evidence because you want to solve a case and get on a podcast or get on TV is not helping the world get better. If your doctors have to list their statistics, what are your statistics for curing cancer? What are your statistics for being a fertility doctor? How many cases are you running versus how many cases are you solving? You don't have to say it publicly yet. I'm trying in the federal government. You don't have to list it publicly yet, But for anyone that's listening, if you're running a lot more cases than you're solving, rethink your process. Change it.
By the way, I think you just like convinced a bunch of people to go to medical school because of your passion for this. And Brett got one last question. I have one question that also touches upon what you just said, that with forensics DNA testing, you don't have the single source. You don't have this like in a lab, clean, really easy peasy. What are all these other doctors doing? Because that's just too easy. Here's the question for you. And I'm interested from a prosecutor perspective too. What kind of degradation to DNA, bones, what have you, is the most difficult to use in forensic science? Is it burning? Is it age? Is it chemicals? What have you found? And your answer might be, I can figure it all out. But what's the most difficult?
I mean, I don't know that I can figure it all out. We're really trying really hard to try to get to as much types of evidence as possible. We are degradation insensitive when it comes to age of bones at this time. So that's something that we have been able to work out. Heating up DNA is something that is really devastating to the DNA. We have identified burnt remains, but it's more difficult for sure. Chemically treating DNA, it depends on how you chemically treat it. I think there's solutions to all of these problems. I think a lot of them require R&D. Again, it's a case-by-case basis, but I would say chemical treatment would be the hardest. Heat is really bad. I mean, a lot of people ask, can you take cremains and figure out the DNA? That's an R&D in our lab, right? So there's a question there. Who knows? I can't tell you that I can do that 100% of the time, right? So I wouldn't run that case. And so there's definitely things that we can still improve on. And there's going to be things that people way past my lifetime can continue to improve on with DNA testing. But now that there is, I think when we started, people thought Othram is just like every other lab. They're just going to solve a few cases this year and that's that. I think we've shown that that's not the case. I think we've shown that, no, we're not going to solve a few cases. We're going to solve all the cases one by one, and it just takes time. But we're going to clear entire backlogs. And there's you've gone onto DNA Solves. You can see the biogeographical identities. You can see the differences in those things. And we're going to make as many cases as we can tractable. And so there's proof now, and I think it's valid proof that we're doing something very different and something that works and is more predictable than what was being done before. Now that we have that proof in the world, let's figure out how to all work together and disseminate it to everyone so that everyone is doing something different and better, and so that we can live in a place where I don't have to worry about walking outside because people are going to be too scared to attack me.
So I said that was my last question, but I'm going to ask one more. How many cases have you guys solved, and what can our listeners do to support the work that you're doing?
We've worked way over 1,000 investigations at this point and returned investigative leads. There's over 100 and something cases that are publicly announced that you guys can find out on the internet. It takes time to announce these cases. Some won't announce because the agency went through court and didn't want to say what technology they used. This is very new, and people choose to do what they want to do. We only announce if law enforcement decides to announce the case. And so you see a lot more of the unidentified remains being identified than you see the criminal cases that are going to court, and that's okay with us. What can you do to help me? DNA Solves is my world. If you go to dnasolves.com, that we have the stories of the cases that we solved. You can share those stories. People don't know what's possible and what's different. Find one that speaks to you and share it in your social media. We have stories of cases that don't have funding. If you feel compelled to or touched by the story, even $1 helps. Every dollar on DNA Solves goes towards the reagents necessary to test that case. There's no one at Othram getting a salary from it. It doesn't pay for anything here. It really is the reagents to test that case so that we can give those people closure. So if you can, help with that. And then the third thing you can do is you can add your DNA to DNA Solves. If you do that, then you'll help us solve the next cold case.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for giving us tangible ways to help you guys, because I I mean, I'm going on DNA Solves as soon as we get off this
Mhm.
call. And I hope that all of our listeners will as well, because the work that you're doing, I think everyone from the last hour of hearing you talk about it should be excited and invigorated, because you guys are in it for the right reasons. The R&D you guys are doing is bar none, and it's still needed. As far as you've come, I know there's so much more to come. So thank you for doing that. I mean, it's God's work. And I see people in your office are still there, and it is late now. It is so late. And I know you guys are there because of the passion for bringing answers to victims and victims' families. So thank you so much for giving your time to us and our listeners, so we better understand and can be more, so we can be ambassadors for you guys as well in the true crime world, and hopefully in the actual prosecution world.
You know, it means the world to me, because what we do is important. Yes, we understand DNA and we can help with that portion, but we're terrible at marketing. We announce ourselves, but we can't disseminate the message. We don't have the audience that you have. We don't have the real life experience as a prosecutor that you have. And spreading this message and being an advocate is equally important into actually being able to make impact and change. And thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope we get to talk to you again in the future. I can't wait to see you again, maybe at the next Crime Con. And, as Alice said, look, guys, it's 9:30 at night and y'all can't see this, but everybody's still at work. So these are some dedicated people. Do what you can to help them. But thank you so much again for appearing on our show, and good luck on everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much, guys.
Well, Alice, that was amazing.
It really was. I learned so much. I hope all of you did as well. And also, it's so great to learn about the different facets of the true crime community and what they are doing to support the justice for victims and closure for victims' families. And, I'm excited because there are actually things we can do, not just learning about the great DNA research and development that Othram is doing, but things that we can do to help them help solve cases.
And you guys heard Dr. Mittelman. There is a way you can help if you want to take part. We are going to be donating on DNAsolves.com to the Warren Police Department Teams with Othram to identify baby Joan Doe. This is an infant baby girl found in Warren, Michigan, who has been unidentified for more than 20 years, and that little girl deserves a name. So we're going to donate to that. You guys, if you want to donate to that with us, feel free. There are lots of cases on there that need our support. And this is a concrete way that we can make a real difference out there in the world. So I hope you guys will join us. This was an amazing interview. Thank you so much to Dr. Mittelman for doing that with us. And thank you to Cheryl McCollum for connecting us to her, because Cheryl is awesome and amazing and supports us and has supported us from the very beginning for reasons that aren't clear, because she's way too cool to be talking to people like us, but she does.
We do love you, Cheryl.
Yeah, she's great. Okay, Alice, do you have anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, all that I can say is this interview was done late at night. You heard Dr. Mittelman was still working, and so were her colleagues. And despite it being late, I am so invigorated. I'm so excited about people like her who do what she does. And so we hope you guys are invigorated as well. And there's hope, especially when we all work together. So donate along with us and support the great work that they're doing.
And look, you can't fake that kind of enthusiasm, especially at 10 o'clock at night when you've been working for basically 24 hours straight because they've had so much going on. You can't fake that enthusiasm, and it was a real honor. Well, we'll be back next week with more standard episode where we look at some other unsolved cases and see what we can figure out. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Testing.
Did you like how musical that was?
That was.
I just did a dance interlude while he was trying to work.
Nice.
Just because I wanted to
get
distract
work
him.
done.
He was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm dancing."
Yeah, there you go. It's like Salome.
It's like 10 p.m. Why not? Why not?
Why not?
We made popcorn tonight, and it's just like so delicious.
That was great.
Great job. You did fantastic.
She's really cool.
She's like so smart.
I know.
I'm like,
I wish I was
how do I distill this so that I can understand it?
Exactly. It's like,
I was not breaking it down for our listeners. I was breaking it down for me.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free